librarians? So my clock tells me that it's the time when I start talking. So, hi guys.
Hi.
How is everybody? Thank you for joining me after lunch, and I will promise to not try to put you to sleep. I won't promise I won't, but I'll promise to try not to. So I'm Jason Griffey. I am a library consultant who was previously an academic librarian for about 10 years. I was the head of IT at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, wherein I did a bunch of stuff and wrote a couple of books, did a bunch of presentations, and I'm now doing consulting in the technology end of the library world. So I'm here today to kind of talk to you about library technology, right? I'm the keynote kickoff for the technology part of this of the conference. And when they asked me to do this, and they asked me for a description of my talk and all this sort of thing, and I came up with the title "Bleeding Edges," and I started thinking about the being on the bleeding edge of technology and the sort of technologies that libraries have used in the past and that we're looking at in the future. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized that it was going to be really not a very happy talk. It was going to be kind of a sad, depressing talk. So I altered it a little bit. I hope you guys enjoy this. I'm gonna see what I can get across to you in about 45 minutes, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for some questions. So first off, hey, MOBIUS librarians, you're awesome, because libraries are awesome and librarians are awesome, right? Like, we do fantastic stuff every day for our communities, for our universities. We are part of the bedrock of democracy, as Bonnie said this morning. It's a fantastic place to be. But my part of the library world, and the part of the library world that I pay the most attention to, is library technology. This is what I do. I pay attention to what's being used, what's been used, what our history tells us about our future. And the truth is that library technology is not awesome. It's really not awesome. If you were to go to someone who does technology outside of the library world and describe to them a library system, they would think you were crazy. The way we do things is influenced by historical decisions that we've made, and really a failure to jettison the past. So what we do is not awesome, and we've been bleeding a really long time. We've been bleeding because of some of the tools that we use. How many people in here have an ILS that you love? It's the best thing ever. It does exactly what you want. Every time you file a bug report with your provider, they fix it immediately. Okay, that's what I thought. Just checking, right? Nobody loves their ILS. It's the primary system that we use in our library. It is the main thing that provides access to our physical resources to our patrons. It is, if anything, the one library system that all libraries have in common. All of us run some version of an ILS. And they suck. They're terrible. They are terrible, terrible pieces of technology. Acquisitions modules are awful. Circulation modules are awful. They're just not well done. ILL. Do we have any ILL librarians in here? Okay. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my take is that the systems that we use for ILL are basically digital systems that reflect analog pasts. We're doing things now in digital format that we used to do in analog format, but we haven't actually caught up to the way things actually work now in the modern day. How many people in here are on Twitter? Let's first, Twitter, okay. If you want to tweet during the talk, please get your phones out and tweet like mad. I love Twitter. How many people are familiar with the hashtag on Twitter, ICanHasPDF? Handful of you. Okay, if you're on Twitter and you have never searched for the hashtag ICanHasPDF, you should search for it now. I think that would be a good use of your time. ICanHasPDF is basically Twitter interlibrary loan. It's guerrilla interlibrary loan for academics who are looking for articles that they can't get. They post a request on Twitter and they hashtag it with ICANN-PDF, and then somewhere in the world someone finds the article for them and sends it to them. How many people in here use Reddit? Anybody on Reddit? There's an entire subreddit called r/Scholar that's just for interlibrary loan requests. Right? People who want what we have, but they either don't know or can't, for one reason or another, go through our systems to get them. They can't wait, or we don't give them access to the particular thing they want. There are all sorts of these things online. There are entire websites devoted to nothing but going around our antiquated systems. Right? And having been in libraries more or less for full-time, more or less for a decade, and prior to that being in academia, I've been in academia more or less since the beginning of the web, right? Since the birth of the internet. I graduated in 1995 with my undergraduate, so I was basically there during the birth of the net. And over the last bunch of years, it hasn't gotten any better. And this bothers me because technology has gotten a lot better. It's just that our technology has not gotten that much better. So why is that? Like, what is it that keeps us from really pushing library technology forward in the way that I think it deserves? There are a few good reasons. Libraries are conservative toward change at the best of times, right? That's probably the understatement of the presentation. Libraries are conservative, news at 11. So we're conservative in our bones, and part of that is because part of our job is to be conservative. Part of our job is conservation, literally in the word, right? Part of our job is to conserve and protect information. So that has trickled into some of our other realms, and part of that is technology. We haven't really, again, in our bones, moved from a world where information was rare and precious into a world where it is trivial and omnipresent. We haven't kind of made that move yet. But there are other reasons, managerial reasons, infrastructure reasons, that we don't give what we need to give to the technology in our spaces. Part of it is incentives. Most of you, I think, are academic librarians. Is that correct? How many? Or anybody in the room a public librarian? Okay, so a handful of you. Okay, so for all the academics in the room, if you work in technology, you'll get this. What does ACRL ask you to report at the end of every year for your digital statistics? What website visits? Literally, the question is, how many visitors were on your website? Something like that. File size for our special collections is asked, right? How many megabytes of files do you have? That's a useful measure. Way to go. We aren't measuring the things that actually would benefit the growth of technology. What we are reporting are not the things that actually show the good work that technology does, and we report it because our funders ask for it, right? So if you are a public librarian, you probably report website hits to your board every year, right, as part of your end-of-year statistics. Is that reflective of the work that your technology group does? Not in any way. It is not at all reflective of the difference you've made in your community. Website hits, again, at a university, not reflective in any way of the actual good work that's being done. We're disincentivized to report that stuff. It's not asked for. At best, the things that we report are side effects of our good work, right? Really, really amazing user experience design results in more hits. We report the more hits, but we don't actually report the fact that this was because of this work that was done. There's side effects of it. And as a result of not reporting appropriate things to our funding agencies and the people that rank us, we don't get money for technology. Think about your library, if you have any budgetary control in your library at all. Think about the number of people that visit your library virtually and the number of people that visit your library physically and the amount of money spent on those two things. Right? There is enormously more money spent on your physical space and the management of stacks and the reshelving and all of the things that go with a physical building, right? Vastly more money is spent on that side of the world than on the virtual side of the world. But I will guarantee you that more people are visiting you virtually now, right? We're not reflective of actual usage in our divvying of our budgets. How many people in here have more than 2 people responsible for your website? More than 2. Okay, that's about 10% of the room, right? It's a crime the way that we have chosen to budget for and pay for what is the future of our profession in the digital world. We were late to the mobile space because we evidently weren't paying attention. How many people in here have a website that still is not friendly on a mobile device? Yeah, right? Yeah, kind of sheepishly putting your hand up and waving. I know you're out there because I've gone to your websites and I've looked. It's 2015, right? It's 2015. We have known that mobile is the future of information access for a while now. I wrote Mobile Technology and Libraries for Neil Schumann in 2009. Right? So, and obviously that was not the first book about mobile tech and libraries, and we knew about it before that. We were really late to that game, and we are still playing catch-up. Why? Because we don't incentivize and we don't budget appropriately for it. We are now late to makerspaces. How many of you either have or are planning a makerspace in your library? Yeah, decent amount, okay? It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Academic libraries, public libraries are all kind of putting in or examining whether or not makerspaces will revitalize their space some. The thing is that the first makerspaces opened in 2006. Make Magazine was founded in 2006. The first Maker Faire was in 2007. We've spent 8 years not doing anything about it, and now we're slowly catching up. 3D printing. 3D printing is the entry drug for makerspaces, right? How many of you have 3D printers in your library? Soon? Okay, a handful, okay. When I was putting this presentation together, I was curious. I went back to my blog and I searched to see when the first article I wrote about 3D printing was. And the first time I wrote an article about libraries and 3D printing was in 2006. So, again, this is stuff we've known about. This is things that we've seen and known about, and yet we still just have not moved on them in a lot of places. So, yeah, so that's the depressing part of the presentation. Years ago, I coined a term in one of the talks that I gave. Experiences become expectations, and that was a phrase that I used to try and reflect that our patrons, when they come into a library, what they are expecting from us, the kind of informational exchange, the technology that they expect, isn't informed by what they find in a library. It's informed by the rest of the world, right? What they expect from us is informed by what they see in the rest of their environment, at their homes, at their work, in the airport, at the bus stop. The public places they go are the things that influence what they expect from us. So the experiences they have, become the expectations that they have. And this expectation setting by things that aren't under our control is basically where I think we've fallen down. We haven't paid enough attention to the stuff outside of libraries. And we should be doing a lot better. It's fairly obvious that we should be paying more attention to the stuff that's happening out in the world and then pulling that understanding into the library at a faster rate. Because technology moves really, really fast. Technology moves faster than almost anything else that we're used to dealing with on a daily basis. There's a couple of reasons, and I'm going to give you those kind of more technical reasons now, and then we're going to look at some of the things that are coming as a result of these reasons. So why is tech different than everything else in our daily lives? Well, There's two laws. There's two engineering laws. And if you don't know these, you should, because they are a framework around which you can understand how technology changes over time. The first of these is Moore's Law. And if you've heard of a law about engineering, you've probably heard of Moore's Law. Moore's Law is named after Gordon Moore, who started a company called Intel, which you may have heard of. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, he noticed that as they were developing chips, that they were getting better on a fairly regular schedule, that every 18 months or so, chips got twice as fast, but they cost half as much to make because the technology got that much better. So every 18 months, you get twice the speed at half the cost. Okay, so that's a fairly standard rule. It's actually been true since then. It looks like it will continue to be true. There are some things on the edges of our horizon that indicate that Moore's Law might break down, like you can only put electrons so close together before physics says no. But it looks like it's going to stick around. So in our lifetimes, it looks like Moore's Law is going to be something we can depend on. Every 18 months, cheaper and faster. The second law that I want to mention is lesser known, but just as important in my estimation, and that's Kuhme's law. Kuhme was an engineer who noticed that every 18 months, again, give or take, that the processing that happened on a chip took half as much energy. You actually had to give something half as much energy to get it to do the same amount of work. So what does that mean? Well, it's the reason, right, that I can have something, Moore's Law and Kuhme's Law, when you put them together, is the reason that I can hold something in my hand that is, a quarter of an inch thick, that has more processing power in it than the entire world did in 1960. Right, and it runs on a battery that's about the size of a credit card. That's why this thing exists. Are these two kind of engineering laws? The side effect of these laws, and the thing that I try to, the way that I try to explain this is, if you want to understand how to think about technology going forward, understand that what these laws mean is that right now, sitting here, is the most expensive and the worst that technology will ever be in your entire life. From this moment until the end of your days, technology will get cheaper and faster. That's all it will do, right? That is contrary to pretty much every other good that we understand. Pretty much everything else in the world gets more expensive and better, or cheaper and worse, right? But technology gets cheaper and better, and that's weird. That's one of the reasons that it's so hard to kind of get your head around it. So for the rest of your life, it will only get better, and it will only get cheaper, and it will only use less power. Hard drives will never be any smaller. Processors will never be any slower. Communication will never slow down. The internet will only get faster from here until we're gone. So the last piece of that, those two have to do with hardware. The last kind of general observation about technology that I wanted to talk about as a framework for looking at a little bit of the future is a phrase that was coined by Mark Andreessen in 2011 in an article in the Wall Street Journal, and that was that software is eating the world. So we have Moore's Law and Kuhme's Law that's providing us with all this really amazing hardware, right? Chips get faster, cheaper, less energy hungry. The software that runs on those gets more and more complicated to take up that extra capability, right? And over time, Mark Andreessen noticed that things that were previously in the analog, previously things that existed in the world as objects, were now moving and becoming software pieces. Newspapers that used to exist in physical form, made out of dead trees and ink, are now pixels on a screen run by content management systems, right? That's the classic example. So things that used to be analog will increasingly move to digital. That's what Mr. Andreessen meant by software eats the world. If it is possible for a thing to be instantiated in software, it will. And because we know what hardware is doing, we know that increasingly everything is able to be instantiated in software. So where are the bleeding edges? When you put all of this stuff together, right? Where are those edges? Where are those razors on the edge of the future? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the near future stuff that I see and just kind of point generally in directions that I think are interesting. Some of the things I want to talk about have absolutely nothing to do with libraries. And that's on purpose because, again, it's the experiences that our patrons have outside of libraries that influence what they expect inside of libraries. Okay? So Kevin Kelly, who was the founder of Wired Magazine and and someone who causes my laptop to crash. Let's open that back up. Sorry, guys. Technology, it's wonderful. All right.
You should have an embarrassing desktop.
That's right. I didn't? Oh, thank God. Oh, whoa, okay. You want to try this one more time? Maybe it just doesn't like Kevin. We'll skip Kevin here. So Kevin Kelly said, effectively, that when you look at the rate of technological change, the last 20 years, if you think about the things that have changed in the last 20 years in technology, right? That because of the speed at which technology changes, when technology gets faster, it gets faster. And then it gets faster again. It changes in an exponential way, not in a linear way. So what that means is that if you look at what has happened in the last 20 years, the next 20 years are going to be even stranger, even weirder, even more radical. The quote from Kevin Kelly was something like, I'll paraphrase since it's not there, was something like, the next 20 years are going to make the last 20 years look as if nothing has happened yet. Right? And I think that's true because of exponential growth. A biologist said it in a way that I find really endearing. J.B.S. Haldane said that the future is not only queerer than we suppose, but it's queerer than we can suppose. Not only is it strange, but it's stranger than we even have the capacity to understand how strange it's going to be. I think that's probably likely. So what's this future look like? Well, one of the things that science fiction told us that we had to be aware of in the future were robots, right? What's a future talk without a few robots? So it's true. I think we are going to be very quickly overrun by robots. But they're not going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And they're not going to look like Daryl Hannah. And they're not going to look like this. The robots that are going to change the world in the next 10 years are going to look like this. Because self-driving cars are just robots you ride inside, right? That's what they are. They're robots. Pretty much every major car company has a self-driving car at this point that they are testing. Google is the one that gets the headlines because Google has done the most testing, the most press, and all of that. If you haven't seen the sort of press about Google's self-driving cars, they've driven millions and millions of miles. They've had like 11 accidents over the course of millions and millions of miles, and none of them were caused by the car. They were all caused by other people. It's a remarkably better idea than having humans drive cars. My daughter is 7, and I am desperately hoping that by the time she is 16, she never drives a car in her life. Yeah, right? I am all in on the idea of a robot car taking her wherever she wants to go and hoping she never touches a wheel because they are just way, way better at this than we are. The interesting thing about robot cars is that people don't seem to trust them. That we've got a lot of evidence that people, I can see people shaking their heads in the audience, that people, when confronted with the idea of a robot car, always think, oh, well, I need to be able to take over. I need to be able to, like, save myself. Even though we have plenty of evidence that we can't. So, and then that's a known thing. The car makers know this. In 2012 or so, there was a fantastic interview with the then CEO of Ford, Alan Mulally. Brilliant, brilliant guy. And they were talking about the self-driving cars that Ford was testing. The technology reporter asked, how do you get through the marketing? How do you make people comfortable with a self-driving car? And Mulally, in his brilliant kind of way, said, "Oh, we're already doing it." It's like, okay, what do you mean? It's like, well, the car that we sell that parks itself, right? Does anybody in here own a car that parks itself? You've seen a car that parks itself, probably, right? You pull up and you press a button and you let your hand off the wheel, and it parks itself. He's like, oh, that's like step one. Have you seen cars with lane assist that watch the road, and then if you drift a little bit, the car automatically corrects to make sure that you stay in your lanes? That's step two. And they're going to keep adding and adding and adding and adding, and then eventually we'll all be riding inside of robots, and it'll be awesome. This is going to change a lot of things about the world once this happens. We're probably 5 years away from automated semis, from having trucking become kind of down the road of automation and robotics. That's going to change rural America in ridiculous ways. There was a fantastic article about it online just a few months ago about the how that's going to change the basically working middle class in rural America, because the majority of people in working middle class homes in rural America are truck drivers. So it's going to change things. It's going to change a lot of things when this happens. The other kind of robot also doesn't look like humans. It looks like this. So these are very shortly going to be everywhere. You've probably seen a drone or heard of a drone or watched a drone or something, right? They're in the news all the time now. They're juggling, and this is automated. Nobody's controlling them. They're doing this themselves. This is, they're getting pretty smart, and they're getting very capable of doing things on their own. You've probably heard about Amazon doing delivery by drone, and libraries have joked about doing interlibrary loan by drone. Lots of those sorts of things are going to happen. We're pretty close. This sort of automated flying robot in the sky thing is going to get really big in the next 5 to 10 years. Even for kind of personal use, you get little personal drones. You can buy a drone if you want to go out and get one. You can buy a drone fully automated. You can basically draw on a Google map, and it'll just go out and fly the route that you drew and everything for under $1,000 now. They're very, very cheap. So that's part of the future. Here's the second part of the future that I want to talk about, and I'm going to do this through a little interaction with you. So I told you about the idea of things getting eaten by software, right? As hardware gets better, software that runs on it starts kind of consuming analog activities. So this is a library question. So which do you think gets eaten by software first? Reference or cataloging? Which goes away? Oh, there's a split room. Nice, I like it. Okay, we'll have a fight. No. Now, so reference or cataloging? I've got my guess. And my guess has to do with voice. When I say voice, it's not really about voice. It's about lots of complicated semantic analysis and metadata in the background. You're probably familiar with voice interactions, personal assistant sort of things through something like Siri, if you have an iPhone. Siri's been around for a few years now. It was around before it being built into the iPhone. It was actually an app before Apple bought them and put it in. But you press the button and you ask Siri something and Siri answers, or you tell it to do something and Siri does it for you. Google has their own version of this. If you're an Android user, Google Voice Assistant, which does very similar sorts of things to Siri. It's a little personal companion that lives inside your telephone that you can ask questions of and tell it to do things. At Google I/O 2 weeks ago, they announced a new feature to that's coming called Google Now on Tap, where Google Now is actually going to watch what you're doing on your phone and be able to do analysis of the things on the screen in order to then help you answer questions. As an example, say you're listening to, what is the example they used was Skrillex. If you're listening to Skrillex, if you don't know who Skrillex is, it's okay. You're listening to Skrillex on your phone, and you hit Google Now, and you say, "Hey, what's his real name?" The system will know, because it knows who you are listening to, that his is the person who is singing the song, and then we'll go out and find his name and bring it back to you. Right? Semantic analysis of objects on the screen, and that's coming. They announced it. They showed it off. These are getting ridiculously better. There are other versions. If you're one of like the 3 people in the world that own a Windows phone, they have their own version, Cortana. That's coming actually on Windows 10 as well, so it'll be on desktops, and it's going to be on both Android and iOS as an app. So Microsoft has their own little personal invisible helper that's going to be answering questions for you. Again, pretty much all of the big guys are doing this sort of thing. Amazon has a slightly different take on how this works. The 3 previous ones that I mentioned are all based on your mobile phone, right, or on your watch if you're an Apple user. Amazon is trying to take over your house. They have what's called the Echo. And if you have not seen the Echo, I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds worth of a video here that shows you kind of sort of what it does. See if this works.
Is it for me? It's for everyone. It's called Amazon Echo.
How's it going?
I'm just finishing up right now.
Is it on?
Oh, it's always on.
Can it hear me right now?
No, it only hears you when you use the wake word we chose. Alexa.
Well, what does it do?
Alexa, what do you do?
I can play music, answer questions, get the news and weather, create to-do lists, and much more.
Awesome.
Alexa, play rock music.
Rock music.
Okay, you get the
Alexa,
idea.
stop.
So this is a little Bluetoothy, network-connected object, a few inches tall, sits in your house somewhere, sits in your living room, in your kitchen, and you literally just talk to it like it's a person. You say, "Hey, Alexa, do this. Hey, Alexa, tell me this. Hey, Alexa, set a reminder, set a timer, set an alarm, put something on a shopping list, buy something from Amazon," because of course you can buy something from Amazon. Why wouldn't you be able to, right? And it just listens for you. It's kind of an unbelievable object. They're expanding it because software eats the world. It gets better. When it launched, it could basically play music and then do a couple of little Wikipedia lookup things, right? But now they have expanded it so that if you have connected home things, if you have LED light bulbs that are connected to your Wi-Fi network, and switches, Belkin makes Wemo switches, which you can plug lamps and stuff into. If you have some of these connected devices, you can actually use the Echo and your voice to tell your house to do things. So, very Star Trek. So my daughter can walk in the door and say, "Alexa, turn on the porch light," and the light will come on our back porch, right? Alexa, play some music. She's living basically in Star Trek, and this just gets better and more omnipresent, right? The last sort of piece of technology that I want to talk about is another kind of interface form. Voice is an interface. It's rich and semantic and gives us all sorts of feedback. Touch is different. And touch is driven by something called haptic feedback usually. So haptic basically means touch. It's the click of a mouse button, right? Like that the button has been clicked because you feel the click. It's that little click that indicates to you that something happened. Haptics are not new for the video gamers in the room. You've had rumble pads on your game controls a lot, so that when you get shot, the control pad vibrates in your hand. That's haptic feedback, but it's becoming different. It's kind of morphing into something that is really interesting. And this is being driven a lot by Apple. So I'm really interested in this from a user experience sort of perspective. Apple has developed something they call the Taptic Engine. It's a piece of marketing drivel that refers to the haptic feedback that you get from some of the new Apple devices. So this is a breakaway of the trackpad on the newest Apple laptops. And if you use an Apple laptop, or if you've ever used an Apple laptop, the trackpad in the middle clicks. You press it down, and it's on a hinge. It physically moves, right? You click, and it moves. On the new Apple laptops, that does not occur. It's a flat piece of glass that is immobile. It does not move. But when you press it, it feels like it moves. That's some serious magic. And it feels like it moves because they have put a lot of R&D time into this they call the Taptic Engine that replicates the feel of a thing even though the thing is not doing it. This is important for things like wearables, like the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch has the same kind of taptic technology in it, so that when you have an alert instead of a vibration like your phone going dancing across a table, it actually kind of feels like somebody pokes your wrist. It's like tap. Hey, are you there? Tap. Are you there? These sorts of nonverbal interfaces, nonverbal feedback mechanisms are something, again, over the next 10 years, going to be a big deal. Got one more video for you, I think this is the last video. One more video. This is something that was just announced by Google. This is another piece of interface technology that I think is really fascinating, likely to be game-changing if they can make it work the way they claim. So, let's take a look.
We use radio frequency spectrum, which is radars, to track human hand. The radars have been used for many different things. To track cars, big objects, satellites and planes. We're using them to track micro motions, twitches of human hands, and then use it to interact with the wearables and Internet of Things and other computing devices.
Art.
So, if that looks like magic, it should. This is basically a tiny little microchip that uses radar, literally radar, in very, very small packages, tiny little chip that just watches your hands and sees what your hands are doing so that you can interact with objects without touching them. Yeah. And this is just the tip of a very long iceberg of technology that is right on the cusp of being something majorly important in the lives of our patrons. Things like, I'm just going to run through a list. Virtual reality, augmented reality, the ubiquity of hardware. As hardware gets cheaper, it shows up everywhere, and you end up with something like the Internet of Things, where everything in the entire room is connected to the Internet, and they can all talk to each other. Crazy. Project Loom, which is another Google project that they're using weather balloons to provide internet to remote areas. Instead of using satellites, they're using weather balloons at a lower altitude. It makes it cheaper, easier, faster to roll out, and they're basically using it to get high-speed internet anywhere they want it. Project Jacquard, which is another really interesting one. These are Google projects, these last two. Project Jacquard is a project that Google's research development unit is looking at to use conductive thread in garments to make control surfaces out of the clothes you wear. So instead, you've got the kind of invisible radar-y thing. You can control your objects with just movements of your hands. But if the things you wore were control surfaces, you could do things simply by bending or moving or twitching. And then the longer term crazy future stuff is biohacking, and that's like getting a plug in the back of your head. I'm not on a list for that yet, just so you know. I will be as soon as they announce it. So how do we prepare for this craziness? Like, what do we do? How do we make tech better for our patrons? How do we prepare for these, the next 20 years? Well, I've got some suggestions. I got a few suggestions. One of them is that we need more tech-aware librarians. Notice that I did not say more IT librarians. Notice that I did not say more coding librarians. Notice that I did not see more computer science librarians. I said aware, tech-aware. We just need people that are aware of the technology, that understand that it's coming, that know its importance, that understand the basics. You don't need to, hand code your own ILS. You just need to know about the stuff. We need more of those. Because that means if you know a little bit, you can talk to the people who know a lot more. We need desperately some more diversity in technology. Librarianship is 84 or so, depending on the survey that you look at, 80 some odd percent female, right? It's a primarily female profession. However, the majority of people in tech and libraries are male. That's a problem. The overall racial makeup of librarianship is like 88% white. That's a problem because our patrons are not 88% white. Just the way it works. The diversity in technology is important. It's not just important because it's lip service or because we're trying to make diversity a goal. It's important because people that are not like you have problems that are not yours, and they solve them differently than you solve them, right? So if we only let tech get built by straight white men, then we only get tech that serves straight white men. And that's a problem. So I think we need more diversity in tech. Here's an example. This was just yesterday, I think. Chris Borg, who is the library director at MIT, tweeted this out, and it was such a stark example of what is wrong with our systems. That in WorldCat, if you search as a subject for African American woman fiction, The Help is the first result. That's mind-bogglingly terrible. I lack words to explain how awful that is as a result for that search, right? So, and this is our biggest catalog. This is the biggest catalog of library books in the world. We have a problem, people. Another way that we fix this is that we hold vendors accountable, okay? When we ask for things, we should get them because we pay for them, right? Anyone that has managed an ILS or an ILL system or any other library-based system is familiar with the Byzantine ways that the various vendors go through the decisions on what to patch, what to write code for, all of that. We need a better system of holding vendors accountable for the things we actually need in libraries. And I say that as someone who is trying to actively sell libraries technology that I make. That's something that I feel very strongly about. We need to hold our vendors accountable. We love vendors. Vendors are awesome. I'm not harshing on vendors. We have a whole row of tables outside full of vendors, right? And we love them because they come here and they support the conference and everything, and that is fantastic. But we should never forget that the money that they're giving us to support the conference is money that we gave them. Okay? Don't get all happy friendly just because they're here giving us money. That's our money. Don't forget that. We need to stop relying on so much enterprise technology. Enterprise technology, again, if you're not an IT librarian, the most telling definition of enterprise technology is technology where the person that builds it is not the person that uses it, and the person that uses it is not the person that builds it. Two very separate groups. Vendor technology usually qualifies. We need to look at open source a lot more than we do. We need to be embracing open source technology in a more robust way than we do, because it's something that we can control. Libraries are built on open information, and the fact that we rely on and pay for so much closed proprietary information makes me hurt. And we need to enable librarians to build things, because when librarians build things, we usually get things that libraries want to use. It is unfortunate that I can't give you tons of examples of librarians building awesome things, but there are a few, right? The open source ILS Evergreen was built by a consortium of libraries in Georgia. They got together, they decided what they wanted, they put the money behind it, and they built it, right? Koha, another open source ILS, same story, different continent, same story. It was built by libraries. On a smaller scale, my favorite example of this is Terry Reese, who is the head of digital initiatives at Ohio State University, builds a piece of software called MarcEdit. If you're a cataloger, you probably know MarcEdit, right? MarcEdit is amazing. It's like the best piece of software for editing MARC files. It's free. He just builds it because he loves libraries and he's a librarian. But he can't do everything all the time. A couple of months ago, there is a Mac version of it, that runs on Macintoshes, and he wanted to. A bunch of librarians went to him and said, "We really want a better Mac version because the one that you have, it runs really slow, and we'd like it to be better." And he said, "Well, I don't have a Mac anymore." And the librarian community said, "We'll buy you a Mac if you will fix this for us." And they did. They literally, the Code for Lib community got together, everybody pitched in a couple of bucks, and they bought him a Macintosh, and now he's fixing it. We need libraries to support that sort of thing. Because there's no world, short of the rise of intelligent apes or a zombie uprising, where technology becomes less important to us. Those are kind of the two situations where technology is gonna get worse. It will never, ever, ever slow down. But when librarians understand technology, when they assess the technology they use themselves and not rely on vendors to do it, when they plan the technology that they want and then find ways to make it happen, and when they create the technology that fills a need in their own library, everybody wins. I've done that twice. Two of the projects that I'm involved in, one is LibraryBox, LibraryBox.us. It's an offline digital distribution system. This is something that I have a lot of passion for. The second is the Measure the Future project, which was one of the winners of the Night News Challenge that Bonnie mentioned this morning in her presentation. And I have about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to say thank you. And this is me with all of my contact information. I've got a couple of minutes for questions. Thanks, guys. Don't all jump. Yeah.
Excellent. I just have this huge question.
Sure.
I don't have any specific questions. I just, everything you've raised is extremely important, well said, and of course it makes one wonder about the future of the profession.
Yeah.
When I see things about like Amazon Echo,
yeah.
I wonder how long it'll be before they can do more sophisticated question answering with some nuance,
yeah.
comparisons, in-depth kinds of.
Yeah. I'm not ever going to bet against software because software gets better faster than we think it will. It's not to say that reference will ever go away completely because most of you are in academic libraries. There are questions that it's going to be very hard for a machine to ever fully grasp. But with that said, I maintain that if we looked at reference questions from, say, 40 years ago, right? So we just took a look at the history of reference, and we looked at the common questions that were happening 40 years ago, and we looked at the questions that we get at the reference desk now. And then we took both groups of librarians and put them together. I think the librarians from 40 years ago would tell you that reference is already dead, right? Because the questions we get now are not the questions they got 40 years ago. They're way different. Sometimes they're more difficult. But often they're not. Anything else? Yeah, Tom.
Sometimes technology gets buried rather than tanks. I thought that aardvark was a brilliant concept for the future of reference. People bought it.
And then it went away. Yeah. That's an argument for open source in my mind, right? Because once something is open, you can never truly bury it. It is sad. That does happen, right? Yeah, sure. Google Reader, like, for goodness sake, like, I still weep openly a few times in a week about Google Reader being buried. But there are tools that just go away. Again, it's an argument for open. The more open we are, the harder it is for people to bury things. Yes, ma'am.
But what about then getting our information on platforms that can help get the word out? I'm thinking about, say, Amazon Echo.
Yeah.
Why can't I ask Amazon Echo, hey Alexa, where can I get a copy of the collected works of William Blake?
Yeah.
Instead of Amazon selling it to me,
Yeah.
you can say, hey, your local library has a copy of the Illustrated Blake.
Yep. I think that is a fantastic idea, and I would love to figure out how to make that happen. I would. Amazon obviously is probably not the partner that's going to do that, but somebody will. Somebody will. That's a good question. I mean, I think that you have to find the right balance. Amazon is pseudo-friendly with libraries in that they love the fact that we voluntarily put purchase links in some of our ILSs. They love that because, well, why wouldn't they? But the right partner, I think Google might be down for that. And as a matter of fact, Google uses, so if you want to get deep into the tech of it, Google uses technology that is conversant with schema.org. If your library's metadata is schema.org compliant, then when someone does a Google search, it is possible for links to your content to show up in the kind of highlighted area. It's the same sort of thing where, like, if you do a Google search and you get a button like to the airline reservations and things like that, it's that same sort of metadata trickery that's going on there. But that's possible. Bing does it as well. Schema.org is a possibility for leveraging that sort of stuff. All right, I think we got time for one more, and then they're going to kick us out. Yes, sir.
Speaking of, this is going to kind of combine both of the two things.
Yeah.
Speaking of how tools can sometimes just go away and stuff, and how we can sort of get into the tools that are out there as well, I think it's important to not get too tied into like particular tools because
Sure.
they go away.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that's caused us the problems that we currently have. Like when you get so that you're so committed or vendor locked into a particular thing. So I think it's important to keep your options open. Be aware that the changes are going to destroy tools that you have been using.
Yeah. In poker terms, don't get pot committed.
Right.
All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it very much. Thanks. Yes. Please fill out evaluation forms.
So in your opinion, which is being eaten first, the reference or the cataloging?
I think reference is first.
Really?
Yeah, at least the majority of reference. Again, there's always going to be specialty questions, high-level stuff that is going to be really hard for machines to get at. But I think cataloging sticks around longer than kind of typical reference interactions do.